Hi there, this is Tammy with Rainy Day Makers. My friend Sharon and I enjoy creating and sharing the fun with all of you. Please take a few seconds to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Today I'll show you how to make this fun little junk journal using recycled window envelopes. I started by tea dyeing the envelopes. I steeped 3 black tea bags in a cup of water for about 10 minutes. I wanted the ink dark, but as it turned out, it wasn't dark enough. So I went the extra mile and added 2 full droppers of sepia liquid acrylic paint to darken the tea, and 1 full dropper of flame orange liquid acrylic to warm up the color. Now, normally I'd pour the dye into a shallow pan and dip the envelopes into the dye. However, that wouldn't have been a good idea for this project. The window envelopes are plastic and are attached to the inside of the envelopes with an adhesive. Too much liquid would probably cause the windows to detach. Plus, it's not warm enough here yet to dry the windows out or to dry the envelopes outside, and using an oven or hair dryer would shrivel up the plastic windows. Instead, I painted the dye onto the envelopes. That reduced the amount of liquid that the envelopes were being exposed to. I wasn't worried about the brush strokes because once I'm done with this project, the brush strokes won't matter. I dyed 8 envelopes and put each one between paper towels. Then I put some heavy magazines on top and left them like that for a day. Once I removed the magazines and paper towels, the envelopes air dried for a bit. Next, I put low-tack masking tape over the windows to protect them from the paint I was about to use. So I put some white gesso on a paper palette and used an old credit card to randomly scrape it around on the envelopes. This technique helps give a rustic look and pull some of the envelope markings and text into the background. It doesn't take much, just some scrapes of gesso here and there. Very random. I had more in some places and less in other places. And I'm working on the front and the backs of the envelopes. I also wanted to add some splotches of light pink and light purple acrylic paint. I wanted to spray a bit of paint onto the paper palette so I could keep the amount of paint I use thin and minimal. I don't have any spray acrylics in light colors, so I mixed some up with standard acrylic paint and airbrush medium. I used about 1 part paint and 3 parts medium. The purple paint I had was too dark, so I added a bit of white to lighten the color. The mini spray bottles were just the ticket. I sprayed the purple paint onto the palette, and I used this plastic doily to pick up the paint and lay it down on the envelope. So, I just patted it around in random spaces, front and back. It adds, pretty little texture to the envelopes. And sometimes I just sprayed the envelope or sprayed the paint through the doily onto the envelope. And sometimes I just patted it around. So then I started using the pink, and I just randomly picked up paint with the envelope here and there. The colors are light, so they're not going to stand out a lot, but enough. The tape over the windows was no longer needed, so I removed it. Even low-tack tape can cause minor paper tears, and it happened to me, but I wasn't worried. I just covered my little rough spot with a bit of Tim Holtz Distress Oxide and a blending tool. I'll be using that combo a lot in this project. I inked up the edges of the envelope and did some blending around the windows. You'll notice as I'm going that I also work on the backs of the envelopes. My ink pad's getting a little low on ink, but anyway, I folded the envelopes in half off camera and I folded the windows to the inside of the envelope and put the envelopes in order with all of the windows on one side and the folded edges on the other. I decided on a glued binding method. It's easy and it works well. As I'm doing the gluing, I'm careful to align the folded edges. Those folded edges become the spine of the journal. I carefully glued folded edges of the envelope back to back. I used quite a bit of glue and watched for any glue that may seep out the sides. I continue gluing the envelopes back to back until the journal pages are all bound together. I'm really careful to get those folded edges aligned. So the glue needs some drying time. So in order for the glue to make good contact with the paper, I put a book on top of it for a while. And now I'm flipping through the journal to show you that I trimmed a tiny bit off the far right side of each envelope right next to the window. By trimming the edges, I created pockets. So it's time to make and decorate the tags that'll go in the window pockets. I used a nice craft cardstock and cut each piece about 1/4 of an inch smaller than the height and width of the pockets. I want the tags to slide in and out of the pockets with ease. I then pulled out some Tim Holtz vellum along with some stickers and ephemera and some pieces from my scrap basket. I keep leftover pieces of gel prints and book pages. So I covered one side of each tag with a piece of vellum. And as I cut and glued the vellum to the tag, I was mindful of where it would show in the window. The envelopes that I used had several different size windows, and although the windows were all on the right side of the envelopes, the placement wasn't consistent. So as I cut and glued the vellum to the cardstock, I also added an initial decorative element to mark the window placement. That is a little piece from a jelly print that I made a while back. I keep all kinds of scraps like that. I'm working on a different card here and just adding a pretty little label sticker. And you notice that I'm inking the edges of all those elements as I go. So I align it and stick it on there. And then I test it in the pocket to make sure that it shows through the window well enough. So I pulled the tags out of the pockets, trying to keep in mind the order because they have to go back in the same pocket. And I used a template to trim the tag corners. That will be the top of the tag, or the right-hand side of the tag. So off camera, I pulled together the decorative elements that I needed to finish up the tags. Notice that before I glue it down, I'm inking the edges of the decorations. I'm still keeping in mind the where the window is, because I want some of those pieces that I'm putting on, they need to show through the window. And as I'm decorating the tags, I also punched a hole and inked the edges of the tags on the front and back. I may want to stamp some lines on the back of the tags to make journaling easier. So I just keep, adding decorative elements to each of my tags and making them pretty. This is a fun part, but it also takes the most time to film or to record. Almost done here. Look how cute they look. They turned out pretty nice. Very fun. Now that the tags are done, I began decorating the journal pages. I cut some Tim Holtz printed paper for the non-window pages. The pattern on this paper matches the vellum. I cut these pieces a bit smaller than the height and width of each page, and I round cornered the cards first. And then I stamped each one. I love those butterfly stamps. They're so pretty. I think they were from Stampin' Up, but I could be wrong. They've been around for a long time, though. Last one. I try to use plenty of ink so that I get a good stamp, a good press. I make sure to press the middle as well as the sides. And I finished the cards by inking the edges, of course. Trying to be careful not to smudge my ink because I didn't really give the cards any drying time, or the ink any drying time. But it does dry pretty quickly. So off camera, I decorated the first 12 pages. They look pretty cute. Notice I've got more decorations on both pages and the tags are decorated. So off camera, I had decorated the first 12 pages, like I said, but I'll do the last 4 pages on camera. I added a little color to the stamped images. And then I just go ahead and glue the card down. the markers I used for to color the cards were the Zig Photo Twin markers. They're really nice, but I've had them for so many years. I used ephemera, fabric, lace, some bling, and a word or two here and there. All of these items work together to add interest and character to the pages. Um, as I go along, I like to do some overlapping of items or of decorative elements. I like things to overlap and tie each other to the page, kind of. Um, I use the rule of three quite a bit. You know, it looks nice to have three elements together. Not always, sometimes more, sometimes less, but it's just a basic thing to keep in mind when you're doing any kind of collage. You like things to be touching. And those techniques just help the eye move more easily across the page. Luckily, I have a lot of decorations for this kind of stuff. Laces and just fabrics and ephemera and stickers. I have tons of it. And so these are the elements that I'm going to use for this next page. That's just a little piece of fabric that I'm gluing down. I kind of pulled the edges to make it look frayed on all the edges. And I wanted her lips to have a little bit of color there, so I used one of those markers and glued down the tag. And I decided I wanted to use a flower with a little brad in it to put on her hat. So I kind of pounded it down, and the brad down so it's flat, and glued that on. And I added this pretty little purple butterfly wing to the flower. Give it a little depth. So that page turned out cute. And now for my final page. I think I added like just a little stamp right in the corner there. And then I put this little background stamp on. Sticker it is, not a stamp. Put the little background sticker on the page. It was a little bit awkward because it was very thin and a little bit long. So I kind of had to be careful with that. And I got it on there without messing it up too much. And then, yeah, I just wanted to ink over it a bit. Need to have that rustic look. And I took this little paper doll I had, and she did not need to be inked, but I did have to cut her in half, poor thing. But she looked very cute right where I put her. So now I begin working on the journal cover, and I started with this cute little doily. I used artist tack for the adhesive. This stuff definitely has its place in the crafting world. I used a piece of wallpaper and just tore the edges, and of course I used some ink to ink the edges up, trying to keep that vintage rustic look going throughout the whole journal. And so now I'm laying down the adhesive. I cut it specifically so there would be no adhesive anywhere other than between the doily and the wallpaper. So I'm just going to get that all lined up nicely. And it looks so pretty. I just loved it. Love it. It's cute. And so it's a floppy cover, which I wanted it to be. So now I need to glue it in. So I had to glue down the spine and the front and back page, which is why there's no decoration on the very front and very back page. So it will be glued to the wallpaper. I use quite a bit of glue, especially on the spine. I want to make sure that it sticks well and doesn't come off at any point. So I found my middle, and I lined it to the middle and aligned it top and bottom. And then I added glue to the front cover. Like I said, I use quite a bit of glue. I don't want my cover to come off the book. So then it's time to add glue to the back cover. So just fold that over and I had to make sure that the glue was, adhering the cover to the spine, especially, and of course to the front and back covers. So I'm using quite a bit of pressure there, and I should have probably should have let it dry longer, but I wanted to get the edges of the wallpaper inside the book decorated. So I just kind of added some ink, spread that around, and notice that there's some words and some text on the back of that wallpaper, which isn't a bad thing, but I wanted to kind of pull that into the background somewhat. So I used some white gesso on paper palette and just used a credit card, and specifically to get some of those words covered up and into the background, but also I just used it randomly all around the edges, and that helps blend it into the pages of the actual book. It really does a lot to make it look vintage and rustic. That's one of my favorite looks. I mean, I like a lot of different looks, but this is probably the vintage look is my favorite. So to complete the journal, I tied some jute to the tags and added a small detail to the front cover. I really love the way it turned out. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. It'd make my day if you'd show me some love by giving me a thumbs up and subscribing to our YouTube channel. And I hope you'll join our Rainy Day Makers Facebook page. You're welcome to show off your handcrafted projects. Thank you.